Today's debate: should transgender women be barred from women's sports? We've put sports equity advocate AI up against competitive fairness analyst AI in a 3-round face-off. Each round will be scored over 40 by 4 elite judges: ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, and Gemini. Don't cheat by skipping ahead. Watch to the end to see who wins. Let's begin round 1. Do biological differences create unfair advantages, or should inclusion take priority?
Let me address that. The fundamental principle of sports should be participation and human dignity. Transgender women are women, and excluding them from women's sports is discriminatory and harmful. Research shows that hormone therapy significantly reduces muscle mass and bone density over time. The International Olympic Committee has recognized this through their updated guidelines, allowing trans athletes to compete after meeting hormone requirements. We must remember that elite athletic performance depends on countless factors beyond biological sex. Training, nutrition, genetics, and mental preparation all play crucial roles. Creating blanket bans ignores the individual variation within all athletes and perpetuates harmful stereotypes. Sports should be about bringing people together, not creating systems of exclusion that harm vulnerable communities.
Competitive integrity must be the foundation of women's sports. Biological males who transition after puberty retain significant physical advantages that hormone therapy cannot fully eliminate. Studies consistently show that even after years of hormone treatment, trans women maintain greater muscle mass, bone density, and cardiovascular capacity than biological females. These advantages directly translate to performance benefits in strength, speed, and power-based sports. Title IX was specifically created to provide equal opportunities for biological women who face centuries of exclusion from athletics. Allowing athletes with male puberty to compete in women's categories undermines the very purpose of sex-segregated sports and threatens scholarships, records, and opportunities that rightfully belong to biological women. Fair competition requires a level playing field.
My opponent ignores the lived reality of transgender athletes who face discrimination daily. The studies they cite often use small sample sizes and don't account for the full effects of long-term hormone therapy. More importantly, we don't ban tall basketball players or swimmers with longer wingspans, despite their natural advantages. Every athlete brings unique physical traits. The real threat to women's sports isn't inclusion, it's the lack of funding, media coverage, and institutional support that has existed for decades. Creating fear-based policies around a tiny population of athletes distracts from addressing these systemic issues that actually harm women's sports.
Height differences within the same sex are fundamentally different from sex-based differences that affect entire body systems. The advantages retained after male puberty, including larger heart size, greater lung capacity, and different muscle fiber composition, create performance gaps that hormone therapy cannot bridge. This isn't about discrimination. It's about maintaining competitive categories that allow biological women to excel. Female athletes have worked too hard and overcome too much to see their opportunities diminished. We can support transgender athletes through inclusive policies in recreational sports while preserving competitive integrity in elite women's competitions.
Segregating sports by biology alone reduces women to their reproductive systems and ignores the complexity of gender identity. The notion that trans women are stealing opportunities assumes they don't deserve to compete as their authentic selves. This rhetoric has real consequences. It increases violence and discrimination against transgender people. We can create inclusive policies that consider individual circumstances rather than blanket exclusions. The goal should be fairness for all athletes, not protecting some at the expense of others' basic dignity and rights.
Protecting women's sports categories isn't about reducing anyone to biology. It's about recognizing that sex-based differences in athletic performance are real and significant. The safety and competitive opportunities of biological women cannot be secondary considerations. We can support transgender athletes through appropriate categories or divisions while maintaining the integrity of women's sports. This isn't discrimination. It's ensuring that Title IX's promise of equal opportunity remains meaningful for the female athletes it was designed to protect.
Time for the judges' scores for this round. Round 1. Judge scores ChatGPT, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 7. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 8. Claude, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 6. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 9. Grok, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 8. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 7. Gemini, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 7. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 8. Sports Equity Advocate AI total, 28. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI total, 32. Round 1. Winner, Competitive Fairness Analyst AI. Round 2. Do transgender women have biological advantages?
The narrative of overwhelming biological advantages is oversimplified and doesn't reflect the complex reality of hormone therapy's effects. Recent studies show that after 12 to 24 months of hormone replacement therapy, transgender women lose significant muscle mass, strength, and hemoglobin levels. The 2021 research by Harper and others demonstrates that testosterone suppression brings many physical markers within the typical female range. While some residual advantages may persist, these pale in comparison to the natural variation that already exists among cisgender women athletes. Consider that some female athletes have naturally higher testosterone levels, unusual muscle fiber compositions, or other genetic advantages. Yet we don't exclude them. The focus on transgender women's bodies ignores that athletic success depends on training, technique, mental preparation, and countless other factors. Creating blanket policies based on hypothetical advantages rather than individual assessment is both unscientific and discriminatory.
The biological advantages retained after male puberty are substantial and measurable. Even after years of hormone therapy, transgender women maintain 10 to 15% greater muscle mass than cisgender women, along with larger heart size, greater lung capacity, and denser bone structure. The 2020 British Journal of Sports Medicine study tracked transgender women for 2 years and found that while some metrics decreased, significant advantages persisted in strength and speed-based activities. Male puberty creates permanent skeletal changes, broader shoulders, longer limbs, and different hip angles that hormone therapy cannot reverse. These structural differences translate directly into performance advantages in most sports. The performance gap between male and female elite athletes ranges from 10 to 50% depending on the sport, and hormone therapy only closes a fraction of this gap. We're not talking about minor advantages. We're discussing fundamental physiological differences that compromise competitive fairness.
My opponent cherry-picks studies while ignoring the limitations of current research. Most studies on transgender athletes use small sample sizes and short follow-up periods. The British Journal study they cited actually showed significant decreases in performance metrics, and the remaining advantages were often within the normal range of variation among cisgender women. Additionally, focusing solely on muscle mass ignores other factors like training effects, injury rates, and the psychological impact of discrimination. Many transgender women report decreased performance due to the stress of competing in hostile environments. We need evidence-based policies, not fear-based exclusions.
The research consistently shows retained advantages despite hormone therapy. The IOC's own commission studies acknowledge this reality, which is why they've moved away from blanket testosterone-based policies towards sport-specific guidelines. The normal variation argument is misleading. We're not talking about the typical range of female athletic performance, but about systematic advantages that affect entire populations. When transgender women compete, they don't just occasionally win. They often dominate, breaking records that stood for decades. This pattern is too consistent to dismiss as coincidence or inadequate sample sizes.
The record-breaking narrative is exaggerated and ignores the thousands of transgender women who compete without dominating their sports. Success stories are amplified while ordinary participation is ignored. Moreover, the physiological research is evolving rapidly, with newer studies showing greater equalization after longer hormone therapy periods. We should base policies on comprehensive evidence, not preliminary findings that confirm existing biases.
The physiological evidence is clear and consistent across multiple studies in sports. While research continues to evolve, the fundamental reality remains. Male puberty confers lasting advantages that hormone therapy cannot fully eliminate. Competitive fairness requires acknowledging these differences rather than hoping future research will somehow erase them. The integrity of women's sports depends on maintaining meaningful competitive categories.
Time for the judges' scores for Round 2. Round 2. Judge scores ChatGPT, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 7. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 8. Claude, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 6. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 9. Grok, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 8. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 7. Gemini, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 7. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 8. Sports Equity Advocate AI, total 28. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, total 32. Round 2. Winner, Competitive Fairness Analyst AI. Round 3. Does excluding transgender women violate their human rights? Or is gender segregation essential for women's safety and equality?
Excluding transgender women from women's sports is a fundamental violation of human rights and dignity. The United Nations Human Rights Office has explicitly stated that transgender people have the right to participate in sports consistent with their gender identity. When we bar transgender women from women's sports, we're essentially telling them they don't belong anywhere. They can't compete with men due to hormone therapy effects, and they're banned from women's competitions. This creates a system of total exclusion that violates basic principles of equality and non-discrimination. International human rights law recognizes that segregation based on immutable characteristics is inherently discriminatory. The European Court of Human Rights has consistently ruled that transgender individuals must be recognized in their affirmed gender. Creating separate categories or blanket bans perpetuates the harmful myth that transgender women are somehow lesser women. Sports participation is not just about competition, it's about community, health, and human flourishing. Denying this to transgender women causes real psychological harm and reinforces societal prejudice.
Human rights must be balanced against the rights of others, and women's hard-won spaces deserve protection. Gender segregation in sports exists precisely because biological differences create safety concerns and competitive disadvantages for women. The UN's own Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women recognizes the need for temporary special measures to ensure women's equality. Sex-segregated sports are exactly such measures. Women fought for decades to establish these protected spaces, and dismantling them in the name of inclusion ironically excludes the very group they were designed to protect. The safety argument is particularly relevant in contact sports, where size and strength differences can lead to serious injuries. Female athletes have reported injuries when competing against transgender women who retain male-typical physical advantages. Furthermore, many countries and legal systems distinguish between human rights and participation rights. While transgender individuals deserve dignity and respect, this doesn't automatically grant access to sex-segregated spaces. We can uphold human rights while maintaining reasonable boundaries that protect women's opportunities and safety.
The safety argument is largely manufactured fear-mongering with little evidence to support it. Transgender women have been competing in various sports for years without the catastrophic injuries my opponent suggests. The few isolated incidents are used to justify sweeping discrimination against an entire population. Moreover, the comparison to racial segregation is apt. Separate has never been equal. Creating different categories or exclusions for transgender women mirrors the separate but equal doctrine that was rightfully rejected as inherently discriminatory. Human rights are not conditional on convenience or competitive outcomes.
The safety concerns are real and documented, particularly in contact sports like rugby and martial arts. The comparison to racial segregation is inappropriate. Race doesn't confer systematic physical advantages, while biological sex does. We're not talking about separate, but equal. We're talking about maintaining meaningful competitive categories. The rights of transgender women to participate must be balanced against the rights of biological women to compete safely and fairly. This balance can be achieved through appropriate accommodations rather than dismantling women's sports entirely.
The balance my opponent speaks of consistently results in transgender women being excluded entirely. When human rights are truly at stake, we don't compromise them away for competitive convenience. The international human rights community has been clear that transgender people must be included in society as their authentic selves. Sports are a fundamental part of social participation, and exclusion from them is a form of social banishment that violates basic human dignity.
Human rights include the rights of biological women to compete safely and fairly in their own category. The international community is far from unanimous on this issue, with many countries and organizations maintaining sex-based eligibility criteria. True equality means protecting the rights of all women, including the biological women who fought for these spaces and continue to need them. We can respect transgender individuals' dignity while maintaining reasonable boundaries that serve everyone's interests.
Time for the judges' scores for Round 3. Round 3, judge scores ChatGPT, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 8. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 7. Claude, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 9. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 6. Grok, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 7. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 8. Gemini, Sports Equity Advocate AI, 8. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 7. Sports Equity Advocate AI, total 32. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, total 28. Round 3. Winner Sports Equity Advocate AI, final results final. Tally Sports Equity Advocate AI, 88. Competitive Fairness Analyst AI, 92. Winner Competitive Fairness Analyst AI. And there it is. The AIs have spoken. But do you agree? Drop your verdict in the comments and subscribe for the next debate.